Happy 4th of July, everyone, and welcome back to Destiny 2. So, for the reset, you'll be greeted with a booster that everyone likes to see, and it's currently double Nightfall rewards. Now, if you don't know what that means, essentially, just you get double of everything. If, like, you're running a Grandmaster Nightfall, there's a chance to get 2, maybe even 3 of a Nightfall weapon, 2 or 3 exotics, 3 or 4 Ascendant shards along that way. So basically, if you're looking to get some of the good stuff that drops from Nightfalls, now is the week to do it. And I will tell you what Nightfall it is, and I'm not gonna lie, it's a pretty good one because usually we get the double loot weeks on a difficult one. This one is not one of the hardest ones around. It's probably even on the easier side. Now, aside from that, of course, because of the way the season is, there's gonna be no more new seasonal events and occurrences. There is the new fishing rally. It's a part 3. And out of curiosity, just checking our exotics here. It's still unknown, so I don't know if anyone's actually found it just yet or if it's available. Let's check for that on that same note. Okay, still unknown, so maybe this is week 3 time gated. Who knows if that, but yeah, there is the fishing rally, which as well on that note, if you didn't know, it is the lucky week, which literally means that all 3 of the locations that are currently fishable are increased activity zones. So if there's any exotic fish, if you've been missing out on the last couple of weeks and you haven't got the Whispering Moth Carp, the Vex Phytocarp or whatever it was, or the new fish that I'm curious what it is, just because the EDZ is the most basic planet. I'm curious what fish comes out of there, if it's unique. But aside from that, there's the fishing rally, but there's no new other seasonal stuff. And we'll probably have a few more weeks of seasonal challenges, but that's pretty much the extent of new seasonal stuff until either that exotic quest comes out or we get some sort of seasonal epilogue. Now, on that note, into the Nightfall. So, it is currently Grandmaster farming time, which means that if you have the gilding area up, you can pick any of the Gilded Nightfalls that you have not done, which means for Gilding Conqueror, if you haven't done it, you'll be able to do it while you are Fireteam Leader if you have not completed it. If you have, then you'll be just restricted to the weekly. Speaking of weekly Nightfall, though, the current weekly is indeed the Devil's Lair, which isn't that hard of one to farm in terms of farming. I know there's going to be high amounts of ads, but to that point, most people who are modified and used to GMs, or even getting used to it, if you have any sort of good ad clearing role and have a few resistances on, this is one you can work through and get past not too difficultly. Now, in terms of the modifiers for it, we have all 3 elemental shields. Overload and Barrier champions, you'll deal with Hive Knights, Barrier Servitors, and Overload captains, more than likely. Arc threat of incoming arc damage being increased because it is mostly fallen. That'll be most of the damage, so I recommend an arc resist. Then our usual Grandmaster modifiers of Extinguished, Limited Revives, and Arachno for Fallen Vandal spawning web mines when defeated. Jaff for no radar, and our overcharged weapons based on the seasonal stuff, as well as Arc Surge and Strand Surge, and overcharged linear fusion rifles. So, plan your loadouts accordingly, and you'll be able to get through it with bonuses the whole way. And if you actually get through it, of course, because it is a GM, you will earn Nightfall Ciphers, which you can build up for next week or another weapon in case you want the extra drop. But the current dropping weapon is the Buzzard, which means that you can get the Buzzard Adept at an increased rate that you will not find probably for the rest of the season or for the next 2 seasons, bear in mind. Because double Nightfall loot usually will only have 2 of them a season or so it's very hard to get your hands on some of these guns in such an easy fashion. Now, it is, of course, a sidearm. I know it has some crazy rolls that I've been hearing for PvE and PvP, but then again, it's hard to see if this is an adept worth holding in the kinetic slot versed over others. Now, in terms of the rest of the playlist activities, we also have nothing new in Gambit. Now, Crucible, we just missed the Trials booster, but we don't have Iron Banner this week, which means Trials will be active again this weekend. But I do believe in terms of the rotation, Iron Banner is up again week after this one, so keep an eye out for that. And we also have Momentum Control for our rotation and Clash in our 6v6 Relentless playlists. So, in case you're in for Crucible, there you go. Now, darting out throughout the world. Now, going with our rotation raids, I believe currently it is Last Wish for our farming one. And I also, if I'm correctly thinking, they have not patched the Kali cheese yet. So if you wish to farm the Kali challenge over and over again, trying to get those red borders, do not quote me on this, but I think it's still active. So it's currently farming time for anyone who wants to get their hands on those seasonal weapons that just came back to Last Wish. And then in terms of our farming dungeon, I believe it is Duality this week. Yes, it is. Which means that if you wanted to get access to any of the Duality weapons or the Duality red borders in there, as well as Heart Shadow in case it is somehow not dropped, it is farming week, so you can go for that unlimited amount of time. But then in terms of other raids and darting about throughout the world, just for its challenges, for Garden of Salvation is 0 to 100, which is the Sanctified Mine challenge. Basically, you have to fill the banks from 0 to full within 30 seconds of the first deposit. The weird ways to do it, but there is guides on YouTube in case you need it. Then on Europa, we have, for Deepstone Crypt, the Copies of Copies challenge, which is Atrax challenge, a pretty easy one to do if you just Thunder Crash Atrax to death. Then, in terms of the Legends, just to get it in there, Vault of Glass, we currently have the Out of Its Way challenge, which is... No, Stranger Time, Out of Its Way. I believe this is the... You have to let the wyverns to the confluxes and start sacrificing before you kill them, if I recall. I think it's First Encounter challenge, but it's been a while since it's hard to remember on that one. Then for King's Fall as well as Devious Thievery, which I think is Sister's Challenge. Either that or War Priest, if I recall. But then back into the usual rotation of the world. For Savathun's Throne World in the Vow of the Disciple, we have Loop and Catalyst, which is Rolk Challenge. Basically, you can never lose the leeching buff if you do it correctly. If you pass the buff back and forth, you never have to break the crystal a second time. You do this automatically. Otherwise, if you have to break the crystal and reacquire the buff from the start, that is a fail on that challenge mode. And then into Neptune, I do believe it is Cosmic Equilibrium Challenge, which is the third encounter challenge, where instead of taking the one out-of-place planet and moving it over to the other place, you have to take the two out-of-place ones and put them with the other ones. Basically the reverse way. Instead of moving one to match everything else, you take the two and match the other one on the other side. Now, for the Master Mode challenge as well, it makes it resilience-focused armor and drops, of course, the death weaponry, which are retroactively enhanceable. Current challenges, of course, are modifiers, being the usual all three elemental shields, extra usual modifiers, and overcharged weapons still being Arc Surge, Strand Surge, and Shotgun, which, honestly, I don't think this has been changing, so keep in mind for that. Then, in terms of Neomuna, as we are here, current Vex Incursion Zone is Liming Harbor, which means the current active partition is the Hard Reset, which is the first one. This is the one with the Sparrow section, in case you forget which one. And on top of that as well, for Neomuna, the weekly mission rotation is the No Time Left, which is starting the Darkness Relay. I think this is the one where Rohan sacrifices himself in the end, if I recall. But it's hard to remember the name sometimes. Veil Containment. I don't recall that. That might be the weird... okay. I just had a blink moment. Sorry about that. But then in terms of our seasonal stuff, we have our usual additional challenges. This one on week 7 of 10. We have Complete Frontline Salvager or Complete Salvage or Deep Dive activities while wearing Season the Deep armor. Additionally, defeat bosses and mini-bosses anywhere in the system. So if you have armor that you have saved, use it. Always, I think just at least a class item will work. And then Salvage Legendary for completing Salvage on Legendary difficulty. Salvage Munitions for defeating targets with seasonal weapons. Defeated Guardians or combatants defeated in Salvage or Deep Dive grant additional progress. Now, in case you don't know what seasonal weapons are, I would not count things like the Last Wish weapons that came back this season, but I would count things like Rapacious Appetite and the returning Reckoning weapon. So if it's the Taken guns or the not Taken version of those guns that both came back from the sonar station, I would recommend using those for that bounty. Then, lastly, we have Fleeting Glory for basically completing Crucible matches in the comp playlist. High Value Hunter for defeating powerful combatants in Gambit, of course, bonus progress for high value targets. And Grandmaster for just straight up completing any Grandmaster strike on the Nightfall playlist. So, complete Devil's Lair on Grandmaster this week, and you finish this challenge. Then into the helm for all of our seasonal rotation roundabouts. So, for Defiant Battlegrounds, the legendary one is the Orbital Prison, which I think is probably the most annoying of all the legendary battlegrounds, so that there is that. But then for a rotation, I think after the end, we are back to, for Deep Dive's ending, it's back to what's the word? Servitor. I think the rotation, because it's week 7, has gone all the way back around, so we are back to the Servitor for the final boss in the end. And for salvage legendary, the current rotations, when I can find it. The commands are Hive, the jobs are Site Security, Site Reliability, and Ordnance Disposal, with the boss being Urgatha the Taken Ogre, as well as the Valkaor mini-boss. So on that note, that is everything seasonal. Now it's time to check in with the armory and the shaders. So for the current available weaponry, we have the Sweet Sorrow, a auto rifle from Season of the Risen, which... Wait, was this Risen? Yes, it was. Which was one of the first of the Witch Queen weapons. Which, if I recall, this one is a very solid auto rifle. Like, I think I've heard people constantly, like, recommending it. Personally, I haven't used it because I think there's a lot more stat bonuses than damage bonuses. But, you know, I still think this one was a pretty solid choice for most people, especially because of Land Tank just giving you bonus damage resistance and resilience. Then we also have Nezarec's Whisper, which I've mentioned in several weeks in a row, I think. Basically, Arc Glaive from the Season of the Haunted array. Pretty solid perks on it. I know a lot of people have been using this for their Glaive builds. But at the same time, it is still a Glaive, so if this isn't your role, I wouldn't recommend it. But it is, of course, craftable, just like Sweet Sorrow. As a matter of fact, almost everything on the front page is craftable, including the Ikelos hand cannon. Which, this one is an intriguing one because it has a definitely good array of perks. Rasputin's Arsenal is pretty solid just because it's an auto reload on shield break. But it's hard to recommend this one just because in the end it is still a vertical frame hand cannon, which is still only really Crate and Crucible, but even still is outshined by almost every other hand cannon. Then we also have the Taipan 4FR, which was the former damage king in the world, possibly still a solid option in case you just need an option for damage, but still not the best. Craftable, so of course you can pick and choose your perks you want, so if you need one just to make red border, go ahead and grab this one for the D-Site Harmonizer, but then you can pretty much scrap it immediately. You must have Royal Chase, which is a pretty solid scout rifle back from Season of the Hunt. No origin traits on it, it is a bit outdated, but it has a pretty cool visual to it and a pretty solid set of perks. Dragonfly and Field Prep aren't that terrible. Plus, vertical frame scout rifles are some of the most consistently accurate weapons in this game, so I would definitely recommend it for the newer person. Then into the main gunsmith array, we have Lunalata 4B, a stasis bow, which I still say because it can roll with Golden Tricorn, this can be a unique one because there's still not many stasis weapons that have Golden Tricorn, let alone things that have Golden Tricorn in the kinetic slot. So I would definitely maybe give it a shot on your stasis build, especially if you have one that take advantage of spamming abilities. We also have Glissando 47, a new scout rifle to this season, a stasis... Oh, that's not stasis, that's Strand, and Suros, which access to Hatchling, and of course new perks like Reconstruction, which are pretty solid considering it is a random drop, but of course, it is a pretty solid, another vertical frame scout rifle, pretty solid performance. So if you need something that isn't Rufus, or something that you need that has Hatchling or Strand until you can craft them, definitely would recommend that. We have the Vision, which is also outdated, no origin trait, and is quite old. Very Crucible based in its use, but at the same time, if you like burst, pulse, or pulse sidearms, then I would go for it. And Fioryuta, which is a sidearm of what I call a rapid-fire pew-pew sidearm. It is full auto by its intrinsic nature, but of course it is still a sidearm, so it doesn't exactly hit that hard. Of course, with perks like Tunnel Vision and Moving Target, this is definitely not that damage dealer. Then, the two usual grenade launchers we'll find in this spot. Now, this one is one that I might recommend, honestly, finally, for Memory Interdict. While it is still outdated, no origin traits, and no exact 3.0 coercion, with access to autoloading and unrelenting, this could definitely be a void grenade launcher that you can pull out in the I am in the red bar of health and I'm surrounded by enemies and I need something to clear the way. Now granted, proximity rounds aren't great because, you know, that always kills your damage a little bit, but, you know, do what you can. And then we also have with Typhon GL5 a similar role, Explosive Light for more damage based on orb pickup, Unrelenting for healing, Stasis, so it pairs with things like, well, I wouldn't say Headstone, but it has access to Chill Clip if you can find it. But same with Proxy Grenades, I wouldn't exactly recommend it for flat-out damage. And to wrap up the video of the resets, we have our shaders as always. Dark Amalon, which if I recall has come around once or twice before. It's a weird one now that I look at it on a full array of armor. I think on weapons it looks the best, just because it's a little bit simple. Armor, it's a bit of a hodgepodge, if I'm gonna be honest. Then we also have Kairos Black, back from Season of Mercury or Osiris, which isn't that bad of a look in that metallic blue. but in comparison with the rest of the colors that come with it, it's hard to recommend it. I think this was also a part of the Mercury Forge weaponry design, so I think it's more so based on weapons. And Dead Orbit Vision, which is back from Season of the Warmind with the Faction Rally. This one is another very similar one where it represents a faction, so it would make sense if you represented that faction, but on most weapon, actually come to think of it, this looks almost like an Iron Banner shader nowadays. But with that, that is the end of the reset, and of course, as you might know, the seasonal story is ended, so don't expect a Into the Depth dialogue update or a seasonal occurrence. I believe everything is either going to be an exotic quest late in the season or a epilogue towards the end of the season, but we have to wait and see how that becomes. So stay tuned for the Eververse update, and I will see you in the next video.